I think that the mayor was so correct, because while I'm here to talk a little bit about the federal role, this isn't going to happen if cities only do something when there's federal money. This has to be a grassroots movement to green everything. Because while we believe that there are a significant number of new jobs that will come under the green category, there's also the greening of every existing job. So if you're a plumber in 2010, you need to have skills that are very different than your peers had in 2000. Because in the year 2000 in the United States, there were no waterless hot water heaters. And in the year 2010, there are a growing number of waterless hot water heaters. And you heard that I just came from New Jersey. When I tried to install one in my home when I was in New Jersey, it took me about 12 phone calls to find a plumber who knew how to do it. So it's just saying that as the market builds, we're going to have new jobs, but we're going to have greening of existing jobs. And if we miss either of those opportunities, it's going to be a terrible economic problem for our cities. Each of you, and by the way, I think the way this conference is organized is exemplary. I think coming in teams is critical. I think the membership of some of your teams, starting with the lead elected official, the mayor's office, it has to start there. The mayors have to be behind this, around this, under this, or it's not going to take root. But the utility companies are here, you have workforce professionals here, you have educators here. It's great. And I bet each of you, as you're meeting with other teams, are thinking, I need to get that partner in my local area. That's somebody I need to add to this core group. Because what does adding somebody to the core group mean? It means that you're going to have new perspective. You're going to have employers who have different ideas on this. And if you're not talking to the employers, you're not going to talk them into moving into your city rather than a suburban area 12 miles away. My belief, you can look at my Vita, Philadelphia, Boston, D.C., Philadelphia, D.C., wherever we go, it's basically an urban mindset. Doesn't mean I don't respect suburbs. It doesn't mean I don't have a love of rural areas. But it means that there can't be suburbs without a metropolitan hub. And you cannot have a metropolitan hub without having good jobs. And in the 21st century, you're not going to be able to have good jobs unless you have green jobs. And you have to have the infrastructure to attract those companies, sustain them with a well-skilled green workforce, and help them grow. Some of the companies that are in this room, utilities, are going to be a cornerstone of whatever we green. Let me tell you how much we believe in that. At the Department of Labor, we're in the process right now of creating an advisory committee for the secretary just based with utilities, just based with utility companies in all the various aspects, because as we move out and put grant opportunities out, we've got to have somebody to test it with. That advisory group will be composed of employers and unions. It'll be composed of community-based organization leaders in these areas, so that as we put the next 50, 100, 200 million, whatever the Congress is kind enough to give us, we're putting it on the space that needs to grow. So if wind is something that's going to be available in certain aspects of the country, we need to balance wind and solar so that we're not picking states as winners and losers in our grant competitions. We fully understand that as you're in here, there are going to be very few wind farms in big cities. Right? I mean, just not going to happen. Maybe La Paz could have a wind farm, but most American cities are not going to be able to support a wind farm. I think that where we're going to have to go with urban development in this area, surely my one hope is that manufacturing will continue to grow. 5 contiguous months of growth is unprecedented, like we've seen in the manufacturing industry. That doesn't mean my eyes are closed to what's happening. The loss of jobs that we've had prior to those 5 months of growth is astounding. But for the last 5 months, we've seen an uptake in jobs in the manufacturing sector that no one would have predicted. And 2 weeks ago, after I visited Richmond, I went to Kenosha, Wisconsin, and I have to tell you that there I learned a very interesting fact. In April of this year, Wisconsin grew more jobs than it had grown in any single month in 14 years. That is improvement, and many of those jobs, over half of them in Wisconsin, were in the manufacturing sector. And that is a sign that I'm not getting, we're not doing victory laps yet. Our economy is not rock solid, but it is certainly building. And while Wisconsin was able to become the fourth largest state in terms of manufacturing jobs, our heart goes out to the states that used to be number 4. We are continuing to worry about Michigan, about Ohio, about Pennsylvania, because we need to be there for them so that they can duke it out with Wisconsin for being number 4 or number 3 or number 2 or number 1. So we think that green in manufacturing, whether it's solar panels or wind turbines, whether it's hybrid cars, or whether it's the batteries for those hybrid cars, or whether it's new ways to do water and sewage treatment, which is the cornerstone of urban America. We know that these green jobs are coming. We know that they're coming with many small companies who are soon going to become middle-sized companies, we hope, but we know it's coming on the back of the utility companies as well. So let me take an example. We put out about $700 million this past year in Recovery Act money. And as I've traveled around the country, it doesn't matter where, I hear these people on talk radio and on television saying the Recovery Act didn't work. I'm living in an alternate universe, because everywhere that I go, I see people in jobs or in training because of the Recovery Act money. And I think we need, and I hope you're spreading this message, we need to spread the facts, not the spin, not the stories, not anything else, the facts about what the Recovery Act money has done in your cities and in states across the nation. Because if we don't continue to have a federal investment in the creation of these green jobs, in the sustainability of these small green companies that are emerging, then we're going to miss out on an opportunity. And should anyone in the audience be thinking that I'm a socialist, that I'm saying that the government should take over business, that's not what I'm saying at all. I have an equal dose in my recipe of capitalism and constructive citizenship and socialism. I think I have a nice mix. Put it in the oven at 350 and I'll be done in a few hours. But we have to look at our competitor countries, not our competitor cities, not our competitor states. We have to look at our competitor countries who every day are making an investment equal to or greater than the $700 million that I talked about that we made at one time in 1 year. One time. China is definitely interested in this arena. In fact, Goldman Sachs, as you saw in the papers earlier this week, Goldman Sachs has invested in green industries in China. I'm not quite sure why they're not investing in green industries in your cities. But I think we need to ask that question. Because there could, I don't say that sarcastically, is there some impediment, some legal mumbo jumbo, some government bureaucracy that makes it easier for them to invest in China than invest in your cities? I don't know. But let me tell you something. It's a question that I've already posed to the people at Goldman Sachs. Because I don't know why we wouldn't be asking our American countries to have the same, belief system that we could grow these industries as they do with China. India puts more money into green on a monthly basis than we put in a year last year during the Recovery Act. So for me to tell you that we're going to sit back and let you do it, that we're going to let a million flowers bloom wherever they choose, would not be responsible. So in saying that, besides creating the advisory committee, the Department of Labor in their 11 budget and in our 12 budget, which is now under development, will continue the commitment to green. We will have no less than $100 million, which is not a lot of money, in competitive grants to take people from the step where they were when they were awarded grants or applied for grants unsuccessfully in the green rounds during recovery and grow with them. So my anticipation is we will probably not have as many whole house auditors next year in a competition as we saw awarded this year in competition, because we believe that that was a first step, an important first step for people to understand what was happening, to make sure people got entry level into the green economy. But we certainly hope that the next round of applications that we get and the next rounds of jobs that you're able to create in your cities and places all over the country require a greater level skill, will be a more sustainable job, and will create better pay. But we started somewhere. And we needed to start somewhere. We were not ready to start with windmill technicians because we didn't have that many wind farms here. We weren't ready to start with real solar panel manufacturing, blue or black, because we only had about 8 sites in the country that were actively making solar panels when we developed those grants last summer. We have 10 times that many now. So in the Hudson Valley of New York, you know, where it used to be a few little companies here and there, you know, what we're seeing is the birth of capitalism, again in green. So in Ohio, in northeastern Ohio, I may have northeastern confused with northwestern, but it's definitely Ohio, Perrysburg, you have one of the biggest solar panel manufacturers. And last summer, when the wonderful career staff at ETA was doing all the hard work, all I do is talk about things. They do all the hard work in putting the SGAs together. We went and looked at what that company was doing. One company in Ohio, if I were to go back there today, there are 4 manufacturers within 10 miles of each other in that same section of Ohio. Because other companies developed, because that one big company had such a backlog, they couldn't take orders for 5 years. So other companies grew up, and no different than Applebee's opening up across from Cafe whatever. You know, they take the line. People don't want to wait in line. They go to the second-tier restaurant. So, but I hope no one here owns an Applebee's. Very bad to say that. I apologize. But I think you get the message. If they can't get their product made by company 1, they're going to go somewhere in the area. They're there already, and they're going to get it made by one of the other companies. Those companies that developed within the last 10 months are now operating at least 1 shift. Now, that's job creation. Is it the kind of job creation that gives us 7 million jobs overnight? Absolutely not. And you know what? That's not going to happen. When I talk to you about the Hudson Valley, where the wonderful Secretary Solis, if you haven't gotten the chance to hear from her, you need to go wherever she's speaking in a town near you, because she's the best. But we went together to the upstate New York, not far from West Point, an old IBM plant, if any of you are familiar with that part of the country, that used to employ probably 2,500 people minimum. So we went there because there's a blue solar panel manufacturer there, and they have about 200 people employed. Now, not close to what IBM did when they were doing chip manufacturing there, but it was an empty building for the last 4 years. So it's at least 200 people and growing, because they have room to go to 3 full shifts once they get the orders for that. I think that's what we're going to see. The days are probably over when a single employer knocks on your mayor's door and says, I'm bringing 5,000 jobs to this town. But what you have to do as you're in these teams is think about the person who comes to you and says, 50 jobs, and I'm going to grow to 100 and 200, and I want to grow in this city with you. I was in Youngstown, Ohio, where they were doing the same thing, incubating these small businesses, but with computer software. And the whole building was LEED certified because the people in computer software wanted to be in a green building. So the town had to make sure they had a facility that these companies would agree to be incubated in. Another area of great development. Many of our cities have areas, run-down buildings, urban blight, all of that stuff. Getting those buildings refitted so that they can be green is going to attract a different kind of person. I said this to Steve, I was just in a meeting with a well-known real estate developer in a Midwestern city who said to me she wasn't really into this greening thing. She didn't get it, except now the people who come to look at her facilities in that large Midwestern city don't want to be in a building that's not green. So cities have to get up to the challenge. They have to say, we have the people to retrofit these buildings so that we can attract these clients back into cities. And finally, you know, we need to have a much closer conversation with our public workforce system that I'm so proud to represent and our educational system. The folks who do education at the technical college level, at the technical high school level, and at the community college level represent the most facile and adaptable players in higher education. They know how to do things quickly. They don't have to sit back and scratch their beards. I was in higher ed for a few years. It was a lot of hurry up and wait. These businesses are not going to hurry up and wait. They're going to hurry up and go to another city. So it is important that you give the appropriate praise to the educational providers who are being quick to respond in a high quality way and reward them, because they need to maintain their infrastructure. Those of you who have done any kind of teaching understand that unless you're teaching English, which is a lovely subject, you know, but books are cheap, material to learn on is not cheap, whether it's computers, whether it's real manufacturing equipment, whether it's simulations, it's not cheap. So we have to make sure that we're working within our public workforce system and with our educational providers to make sure that they have the infrastructure costs that they need to be ready when you need to send someone. They cannot do it one trainee at a time. They can't hire faculty, they can't buy equipment, it's just impossible. And let me tell you, if that's what it was like in the 20th century, it's gonna move at rapid fire pace in the 21st century. If we don't respond, somebody's gonna get an online program from somewhere else. We're not gonna know anything about the quality. We're not gonna have any ability to customize. We have to home grow this ability to respond with customized training to employers' needs. If we don't, we're missing an opportunity. I'm speed talking because I want to make sure I have time for questions. So I'm going to stop there. Know that we at Labor, along with our partners at Education, at Energy, at Commerce, at SBA, at HHS, who has a real dog in this fight in terms of greening of healthcare, we are fully ready to not tell you how to do something, but to support you as you figure out what it is you have to do in your local communities. We understand that it's not going to be a cookie cutter. We get that. But we need feedback from people to figure out how we let Seattle move forward while we're getting, you know, Mobile, Alabama up to the starting place. We need to make sure that our cities across the country, I mean, if you went around the country today, it was eye-opening to me as I go to some of these places. There are some places where I would be carrying a plastic soda bottle or a can around looking for a recycling bin. They don't exist in some places in this country. They haven't started to recycle yet. So I'm not saying to you anything about saying one city's better than another, but cities are at different places. And employers are going to look at cities for their access to water and workforce. They're going to look for cities for their access to interstate highways and airports. It's not always going to be the same thing. So the federal money has to understand the different starting places that cities are in. You need to commit today to making sure, either through, you know, your organizations or individually, that you're feeding us what your needs are, so that as we put out new funding opportunities in our program year 2011, that we are not putting you at a disadvantage because the money we're putting out is behind where you are or so far ahead of where you are that you can't compete. So please commit to that, and I'd love your questions or comments, anything you'd like to say. Yes, sir.
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
Andreas Kluver, Alameda County Building Trades Council. We actually also had lunch a couple weeks ago.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
You're telling everybody my secrets.
Is this on here?
Yeah.
Okay.
We had a lovely meeting with organized labor in Oakland.
Yeah, that was really great. Yeah. And I think maybe I'm repeating a question I think I asked back then, but in terms of you know, where the building trades are coming from, I think where we have apprenticeship programs, and it's not all over the U.S., but in California, I think most of the areas. Oh, okay, sorry. Most of the areas have what we believe are some of the finest training programs in the country that are I think providing the kind of training necessary for what is in effect, I think, as you indicated, with the waterless heaters, which are basically new technologies, which is something we've been doing for a very long time. And I think with our team here from the East Bay, we've been having a lot of discussions about workforce development issues. And I think from the trades perspective, in terms of reaching out and getting hard-to-serve populations into the trades, I think one big role that needs to be played is around bridge programs and pre-apprenticeship. So I don't know if you can kind of briefly describe what the Department of Labor is doing is to kind of to come up with a kind of a coordinated approach that looks at, you know, every program's strength, including the community-based organizations, the community colleges, and the apprenticeship programs.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, our first and foremost thing is to make sure that the folks that are in construction are full employed. You know, so we need to get far away from where we are right now in terms of the unemployment of certified construction workers. But at the same time, many of them, well, they're going to work another year or two and they're going to retire. It's a graying area, just like utility workers. So I think the apprenticeship programs are just a shining example of learning while you're earning, showing the value of continued education, and there's something we're going to continue to support in an even more broader way than we have during the past year, and certainly in a broader way than they've been looked at over the last 10 years. But I want to spend just a second on bridge programs. You know, we operate through ETA all of the Job Corps programs, and since we've brought them back as of March 1st, and all of the Youth Build programs. So one of the first things we did is make sure that Job Corps and Youth Build are using curricula that the building trades would recognize as certified pre-apprenticeship training. I think, and this is, believe me, if there are Republicans in the audience, this is not about the last administration. I want to be clear about that. Every administration prior to this one has put out money from the Department of Labor and not said the training should lead to an industry-recognized credential or a path to a degree. That's over. That's changed. And it will be up to whoever takes over after me to undo the good work that the career people and the politicals are able to do in this. It didn't make sense under CETA to train people for jobs that they couldn't get. It didn't make sense under JTPA to train people in job areas where they didn't have the academic or the occupational skills to qualify for those jobs. It certainly doesn't make sense under WIA. So everything that we put out will say you have to, and by the way, we've actually included the word apprenticeship programs in things that we put out for the first time, which is really appalling to me. But we will, every dollar that we put out will say should lead to a credential, an industry-recognized credential or a degree or a pathway to a degree. And in light of that, many of you are probably sitting there, especially those of you in the workforce, and say, yeah, what credential? Ahead of you on this, actually I'm way behind on everything, but this summer we're going to begin in earnest some conversations about what credentials have earning power in the workforce. So in other words, if I have a credential, do I make more money or do I get the job over the person next to me? That's the way we're asking the question. We're going to have a list of those credentials. It will be a living list on a website at DOL by 2011, which we know will change. But what it will put an end to is the raping and pillaging of first generation and poor people, you know, first generation to college or post-secondary education and poor people who have been spending their own money and your money, taxpayers' money in Pell Grants, to go to places to get credentials that are obsolete, out of date, and worthless. And yet they put their own money in, they use our money, and these schools continue to exist, and shame on them. And if they go out of business, those are businesses that I won't cry over, even though we'll be losing jobs. But keep us honest on this, because that list, once we get it done, and it'll take us till 2011 to get it done, once we get it up there, people are constantly going to have to test us, and you're going to have to be as open with us as we're trying to be with you. Tell us when that doesn't work in your area, because we'll asterisk it and say, this doesn't work in Seattle, Topeka, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, whatever it is. So those are the kinds of things we're doing, and I appreciate your letting me opine. Yes, ma'am.
I am very encouraged by what you're saying, and I think it's long overdue. To continue that thought, where are we with WIA reauthorization? And is the mention of more interface between Department of Labor and Department of Education going to be embedded in legislation going forward?
Well, first let me say to you that alignment with other departments is going to happen whether the Hill tells us to do it or not. You know, you've seen letters already. You've seen letters coming out of my shop that say you can be on Pell and have your Pell eligibility determined by your UI status this year. Those letters went out jointly with Education and with ETA. We sent the same kind of letter with David Hansel from HHS on TANF, saying the day is over where a TANF person can't be in WIA services. We will continue that kind of joint guidance that goes out. We are looking, now I come back to WIA, we are doing all, the Senate is writing in a bipartisan way. I would fully anticipate they have a document to view by the end of next week. We haven't seen any paper yet. We've given weeks of technical assistance. A full-time attorney from our SOL office is up there helping them write the legislative language. The Senate has, just like the House, a branch, a bipartisan branch or nonpartisan branch that writes their bills, but you can't send them things written in handwriting. You have to do them in legislative spec language, so you need a lawyer to do that, and right now there are no lawyers that are in leadership on the Senate committee that are working on this, so we gave them a lawyer. We've started conversations with the House. We've talked about data mainly and data collection, but I think, you know, if we know and respect and love both chambers, the Senate is slow and deliberative, and the House is pretty fast to act. So if the Senate can get a bill out next week, I believe the House could write a bill on a Monday and have it passed by Friday. So I'm not worried about that. We clearly have a narrow window. I mean, Congress is going to go out in October. It's an election year. People are going to go back and run. We have all the appropriation bills to get finished between now and that date. We have the climate bill pending. You know, we have a number of other things that are in discussion that might happen, like UI integrity, which we certainly hope happens. But I think WIA has a shot. It just has to get out on the street so people can start looking at it in June. And I would say the same, I would say to you what I've said to other people, the community has to make a decision. Do they want a reauthorization this year, or do they want to nitpick this bill and kill it? Because if people start saying it shouldn't be this, it should be this, it should say the instead of and, it should be, I'm not talking about big problems. I haven't seen the bill. If it's a big problem, we should blow it up, all of us. But if we say they don't say sectoral enough, they don't say regional economy enough, they should say big and small business instead of just business. If we start doing that kind of stuff, it's dead. If we instead, as a community that cares about the public workforce, say, this is pretty decent, we should move forward, and then we should knock Jane over the head and Brenda Dan Messier as they're writing regulations to make sure that the stovepipes are commingled. And adult literacy is one area where we're doing a large amount of work. Contextualized adult literacy is a key for any reauthorization.
Just a follow-up, and what are you going to do with the DOL document or resource that is the career pathway? Because that's good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're not gonna put anything to sleep except career voyagers. That's put to sleep. May it rest in peace. It's being modernized. I hope you're all participating in the challenge, the video challenge, $1,000 prize for each of 1,500 jobs. Get your video to us by June 18th. It's our attempt to, all on the DOL website, doleta.gov. We're trying to get some excitement about some new job categories and some old job categories. And LPN isn't what the LPN was when your mother was born. You know, I mean, it's a new job. It's much more technological. And a Boilermaker isn't, you know, a shot in a beer in a Pittsburgh barroom. Sorry, Pittsburgh. You know, that's not a Boilermaker. So I think we're trying to get that stuff out. And we are going to take everything that we have and put it out there and let you shoot holes in it so that we can figure out how to modernize everything. Because we need to make sure that the tools that we have, like ONET, which is an incredibly useful tool, we need to make sure that people are saying to us, ONET's the perfect tool, except we need it written easier so people can understand it better. You need to give us that kind. I'm not plugging for that, but I'm just saying, you don't always need to tell us that everything's great. You can tell us. I have lots of smart people who love projects like this. I'm not sure they love it, but they're very willing to take on projects like modernizing or, you know, great enthusiasm when we came up with the idea to do these online things like the Job Aggregator Challenge and now this challenge. Instead of people going, oh, one more thing, they were like, oh, this is pretty cool. You know, nice to have career staff who feel that way, who when you come in with an idea say, how do we move this forward? And then the next time I see them, it's done. It's kind of like like being the man behind the, the Oz. I'm the wizard. I say it and it happens. It's great. Who has the microphone? Oh, we have 2 mics.
Yes, we do.
A quick question.
Mike Waldo, I'm the training director for the El Paso Electricians. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I was calling on me. For El Paso Electricians JTC. This all sounds real good, but what are the DOL planning on doing to beef up your particular department, again, with all the changes made to 29 CFR last year, and we need accountability. My particular DOL rep is one person. They took all her staff away about 4 or 5 years ago. She has the whole state of New Mexico and all of West Texas. And I mean, she worked her butt off, but she cannot get around everything and we've got a lot of abuse in apprentice programs. That you really need to get some more people out there in the field so we can get some accountability about this stuff.
Yeah,
do you have plans for that?
No. Unfortunately, our FTAE count is going to go down instead of up. Flat budget for domestic programs, and we were fortunate enough to have about 200 Recovery Act hires who all turn into pumpkins on September 30th. So we will add 38 positions this year. Some will be in apprenticeship programs, but quite honestly, they're going to go to states that didn't have a state director. So I'm not sure we're going to get more boots on the ground in apprenticeship. We're going to have to use other ways to do the investigation and use a lot of you as our eyes and ears. I mean, there's just no way to rob Peter to pay Paul in this one. Every one of my shops is resource starved. Nobody is close to where their FTE count was. I think just in the office that oversees the Workforce Investment Act, I think they need 40 people themselves to get back to their 2000 level. I'm just not going to, my UI office, the average age is 50. I mean, I have serious problems. The last count, 35% of my employees at ETA within DOL were eligible to retire yesterday. So I have a huge problem. I have a very senior, high-grade workforce that works very hard, but I can't afford to bring on more people with a flat budget. So it's really difficult to add bodies, and I'm not good at lying. So if we get an opportunity to get some additional people, clearly apprenticeship got, of my 38, apprenticeship got 5 of those slots. John Ladd is hated. Everybody else is upset that he got more slots than they did. And we put a lot of slots in our regional offices because we think they're the boots on the ground. So we did add people there, much to the dilution of my efforts to add bodies to my national office. It's a horrible situation to be in. I recognize it. I appreciate your saying it. I'll take it back to John Ladd and let him know that somebody out there is advocating for more people for him. But 38 additional positions when I'm losing 200 ARRA, everybody's unhappy. Sir.
Could use some words of advice. We're Detroit here.
Oh, good.
Last year, and this doesn't fit your area specifically, but maybe systemic. Last year, Vice President Biden came and awarded $1.35 billion on batteries for electrical vehicles, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And just in the paper a couple of weeks ago, one of the bigger companies there said, we're ready to go, but we just haven't received the money. And of course, with this being a sectoral workforce training kind of a program, the people we train are going to need the jobs will come from the company. Any thoughts on how that money gets accelerated into the system, if at all? It's been almost a year.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. I mean, I can tell you my own experience is I treat money like a hot potato in my personal life, and in my professional life, it comes in one hand and goes out the other. So our money's out the door. Do you know, did that money come from energy? So I would strongly suggest, my contact there is the Assistant Secretary Johnson. I would call her office and say, how do we undo this money? Or, happy to, if you call my office, make the connection for you. I mean, I think that's a long time to wait for money to come down, whatever. And I think it's, we try very hard, and it's a daily battle at labor not to talk about things until they're cooked. you know, and I think that it's something that everybody with good intentions tries to talk about. I don't talk about money until it's out the door or ready to go out the door, because I think people they think, oh, another big lie, you know, big political lie. We had a big political hoo-ha, and we try not to do that. I think in business, in order to get companies started, I think energy and commerce have to work a little bit differently. They can't push the money out the door because there's all kinds of wheeling and dealing to get the business to move there. I actually had a conversation at the auto show with one of the people who's going to be in that battery thing, and he's just a dynamic person. Like, he really makes you believe it's going to happen. So and may I just say one other thing about Detroit, because it may be true in your cities. One of the things we have to really work on if we want to put America back to work is, while we welcome the talents of the international workforce, we really need to make sure that Americans are getting into those jobs. Your 2 metropolitan hospitals are completely staffed by Canadian nurses. We have to fix that. We have to fix it. And I encourage you to look at the use of H-2A, H-2B, H-1B visas in your local community. You can check how many there are. It's not that I want to have unemployed international workers, but we can train young men and women to be nurses in Detroit. And, you know, I mean, God bless Canada. I'm thrilled that we're helping them recover from their economic downturn. But those are good jobs, you know, and healthcare is not going away. So I hope that all of you will look at that. We hope through our regulations to give the states much more power than they had previously under the regulations to make sure those jobs are advertised. Unfortunately, with nursing jobs, you need to have a 2-year window that takes them 2 years to get trained. But you have a great community college in Macomb, and the other one, Metropolitan College, is very good as well. So I hope that you can solve that problem for me. Because every time I go, boy, and do you have your mayor, you know, for any of us who like sports, he's an icon. But your deputy mayor, Kirk Lewis, he is just terrific. I mean, he just exudes confidence. I had a brief meeting with him, and very rarely does this happen. I was begging him not to leave. Just give me 5 more minutes. So he was really an impressive guy. I think Detroit's on the move. I think that leadership, I don't know if somebody's here from the mayor's office. If there is, don't tell me, because then I'll stop. But that city is really, for the first time in a long time, I really believe that city has the right ingredients to come back. And it's terrific. And I hope we all see it. Really impressive. Really, really impressive. Somebody else. Yes, ma'am.
Jane,
oh, sir.
Greg Irish from LA.
Hi.
Where are we on summer jobs?
Well, funny you should ask. I had a hearing before I came. Why do you think I'm so happy to be here? I had a hearing this morning where I was like baked and grilled and basted. But the good news is that it is in the extenders bill. The bad news is they thought on the House side. Remember, if it has money in it, it has to start on the House side. They thought it was going to be dealt with today. It has $1 billion as of today for summer jobs. It has some problems. I don't know what those problems are, but I know that my hearing was on the Senate side, and the chairman of the Finance Committee, Senator Baucus, told me that he's good with the bill. So if they can iron out whatever the problems are to get the votes on the House side, send it over to the Senate, we could have $1 billion by Friday. Now, more realistically, and all the other things that are in the extenders, like UI, you know, which all of us know, it's bad enough to deal with the 99ers. It's much harder to deal with people who still have eligibility, but we don't have the money to pay them in the extension programs. So I am optimistic that we could have a bill at least by next week. And to tell you how serious I am about that, I'm looking for my people that are here. They could tell you that we're already working on the Teagle, and we've already done the runs. So we know under every scenario what every state could get. So literally, it'll pass, and we'll get the guidance out to the field the next day.
Got it. And we have the largest public utility in the country. Is OJT going to be allowed within a public utility as part of a training component?
For our OJT piece right now, the only thing we're really not allowing is you know, political kinds of jobs. We don't want to get into some place where a city or a state is laying people off and then supplanting. So for a utility, remember the key to this is going to be the employer who signed on with you. This is in competition. They're being paneled. They're being looked at today, so I can't say a whole lot. But I would say this to anybody. The key is going to be, do you have an employer partner, series of employer partners, who are legitimately going to consider hiring these folks at the end of OJT? Broke cities and broke states wouldn't fit the bill. You know what I mean? Like that doesn't look like a likely candidate. A utility who knows they're going to hire at the end of it, I would think that would be a much more palatable candidate, regardless of whether we call them public or private sector jobs.
Julie Sinai here in front. Oh, hello.
Oh, there you are. Hi.
East Bay, City of Berkeley and East Bay Green Corridor Partnership. Kind of in line with what you were just saying, two questions. One, do you think that the wage enhancement funding, the 80% wage enhancement, is something that's going to get extended, the ARA funded through the TANF dollars? And then the other question is, we've been discussing a lot this whole issue of funding going into training and funding that might be necessary to go into business development and business growth. And what is DOL doing in the sense of reaching with SBA or Commerce or whomever is the appropriate entity to really look at how do we infuse more money into the private sector to grow their businesses so that they can actually hire people?
Yeah, that's never going to be the top priority for DOL. Commerce and SBA, that's going to be a top priority. But I don't want to give away all my secrets here, but the person who's going to moderate your next panel is one of the people who's working on this. We know we haven't done enough. We at ETA haven't done enough to tell you about how to help the small businesses in your area. And I hope that we will have a guidance letter coming out shortly to make sure that you know, everybody knows SBA and microlending and all that, but we think there are some other government sources that people aren't as familiar with that we're going to put out in a guidance letter. We're working closely with them. We're trying to do some things collaboratively. We're trying to bring, for instance, since we know entrepreneurship is such a tough thing to do under WIA if you're a local, because they don't fit our performance measures, and it skates very scarily near the legislative ban we have on business capitalization. So I understand people's reluctance to do that. So therefore, I think it's incumbent on us to partner with SBA and their SEA program. We had a little pilot. The pilot was studied. Project Gate did an extensive study on it. Really good results. I'll get the numbers wrong, but the gist is the same. Of the 800 people we followed that went through that program, about 20% of them started jobs, which doesn't sound like a resounding success, but all 800 of them started businesses, excuse me, about 20% started businesses, but all 800 got good jobs. So what we are finding out, look, when you go to be trained as a widget maker, you're very targeted, you're laser focused, nobody's they're not teaching you how to make a sprocket, they're teaching you how to make a widget. Nobody's really talking to you about, if you know how to make this widget, you could do an architectural design of a building. Nobody's talking like that in training programs, because that's not the purpose of training programs. In entrepreneurial training, it's the whole big world. So I think it's really important for us to think about doing this, particularly in communities of color, particularly with low-income folks. We tend to pigeonhole them into, let me give you something simple to do, and then you can do it, and good for you, go out and get that $9 an hour job. I don't want to minimize that, but I think if we partnered it with bigger programs like entrepreneurial training, we would then walk the walk that I think we all believe, that there is brilliance everywhere. And except that we treat some people from when they're born like menses, and we treat other people like they're peons. So the entrepreneurship training, I think, is a really good thing. We're going to try to get that moving. It's very slow. I don't know. Daniel could tell you, wave your hand, Daniel, that he's been working on this. He's one of my special assistants. He has been working on this probably 3 days a week for the past 6 months, and it is just taking an immense amount of time to walk the walk with an agency that our agency hasn't walked very closely with in the past. I think tell me the word, close? Yeah, he's not saying the word. Let me go under. Thanks a lot, buddy. I think we're close, and I hope over the summer we'll be able to get some of this out. It will require a little bit of money from us, not a lot, but we can get it started. Yes, and then is it okay if I make this the last question? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Joanna from Wisconsin. I'm the Deputy Secretary, so you were with my secretary this morning at the Senate Finance Committee. Thank you to the Department of Labor.
She was great.
She is great. We love her. We love you, too. And that's what I wanted to say. Department of Labor
Did you bring me a Kringle?
No.
Then you really don't love me.
I grew up in Trivers where we have
I was a size
Sundays.
4
I will
before
bring
went
you
to
one of those.
The Kringles killed me.
What I wanted to say is the Department of Labor got their money out the door so fast, and it was very, very helpful, and I think we're starting to see the effects of that in Wisconsin. Our bigger problem, though, and the one that I go to bed thinking about every night, is we have 700,000 adults in Wisconsin that are low-skilled and low-income. How, in your experience on the Senate and in Congress, how do we make the case to Congress to say we need to go big scale to get to that population, because they are not skilled for the jobs of the future, the middle skilled jobs, and the WIA programs only touch a slice of them. How do we make the case? What would your advice be for that type of effort and agenda?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you the Senator Kennedy motto, put a face on it. Make the people that represent you see that that's a living, breathing person, not a category in a statistical study, and let them know the barriers that they face, because the barriers are so large sometimes. Sometimes it's English language, sometimes it's communication, even though they only knew English. It's writing, it's reading. Sometimes, more often than not, it's math. You know, and how do you teach a 40-year-old disadvantaged adult how to do modern math? I mean, it's very difficult. So I mean, we need more money, but before we do more money, because I think this is the pushback you're going to get, we have to work together. That's why we've been working so hard in this first year on the alignment between TANF and WIA, disadvantaged adult, on the alignment between adult literacy and the Workforce Investment Act, because I think, Title I, we have to make sure that people aren't learning, if they want to be a CNA, a certified nurse assistant, if they want to be a CNA, they're not going to adult literacy and learning how to read and order food at a restaurant. They're instead learning medical vocabulary that will accelerate them towards getting their CNA. We're not thinking like that, globally. Across the nation. There are some examples where people are really thinking of it. Washington State's iBest is a clear example of that, but there are other homegrown examples of that as well. You, in your cities, can make that the way adult literacy and workforce are delivered. You can just change it. Your mayors have the ability to say, we're not putting out dollars in adult literacy anymore for people to learn to read antiquated textbooks. We're going to make them read what they have to do to make sure they can pass an AccuPlacer to get into college, or whatever test you use at your community colleges, or we're going to make sure that they get the reading material that they need to qualify for an apprenticeship program. Whatever it is, technology, math, reading, writing, speaking, whatever it is. And, don't wait for the Congress to do it, because that could take a while to get to that point. I think local areas can get to that point immediately. You can change the way you give out your state dollars, your municipal dollars, how your libraries function. Are any librarians on these teams? Libraries are the place that a lot of disadvantaged adults go when there's a long line at the one stop, or when the one stop only lets them on the computer for 15 minutes. And libraries, I have never seen libraries being a part of economic development teams. And they are a real engine, because people go there to take their time, and they can put their kids in reading hour, so they don't have to pay for childcare. So with that word of wisdom, bring the libraries back, right? Thank you so much.